This video is sponsored by War Thunder. Hello there. Check this out. Whoa, sorry, not that, my bad, sorry. There we go. At the risk of sounding cliche, SpongeBob SquarePants, for all intents and purposes, is the animated television show of the 21st century. To put it into perspective, its cultural footprint is so deep that even people who've never watched a full episode have definitely felt its impact through meme culture alone. With a show so popular among kids and adults alike, it's no surprise that SpongeBob has been airing new episodes consistently for the last 25 years or so, having just concluded its 15th season. So, with 15 seasons of television and counting, it's kind of remarkable that the vast majority of SpongeBob's cultural influence is found almost exclusively within its first 3 seasons, only making up about 20% of the show's entirety. Everything after that has been largely ignored by the broader internet, which continues to recycle moments from the early seasons almost exclusively. Well, that's kind of odd. Why would that be? Sure, it'd be easy to toss it up to a wistful affection for the past, but I think that's far too shallow of a take. Why would a show whose earliest seasons, that are older than most of Gen Z, be what's most fondly remembered today? Could it be that the show's characters have become shallow imitations of themselves? Or maybe much of the humor has fallen flat in later episodes? Perhaps its art style has changed, looking nothing like it used to. Or maybe it's none of those. Yeah, no, it's all 3. Okay, so what makes me different to every other schmuck who's made a video just like this one, complaining about how a beloved cartoon has become unrecognizable in its later years? Well, for one, I didn't get to do it yet. And secondly, there's recently been a spark in dialogue regarding the differences between classic SpongeBob and his modern iteration. At the end of SpongeBob's 15th season, Nickelodeon aired a 45-minute special where modern SpongeBob travels back in time and runs into his old self, faithfully designed and voice acted as though he was ripped from a classic episode. Now, without the buffer of 20 or so years between them, the contrast is jarring. It's never been more clear just how much has changed, and in my opinion, not for the better. But to really understand why so many people take issue with modern SpongeBob, I think we should first look at what made the original work so well in the first place. Cue bubble transition. Ooh, fancy. SpongeBob's setting and characters are iconic, obviously, but even more than that, I think they may be the easiest characters in the world to describe just based on their personalities alone. SpongeBob is kind, optimistic, emotional, wimpy, and energetic. Squidward is rude, sarcastic, pretentious, self-centered, and pessimistic. Patrick is a massive. So with a show full of characters with overtly basic and obvious personalities, you might get the impression that SpongeBob isn't very complex when it comes to character conflict and dynamics. And you'd be right for the most part. However, something I've noticed about SpongeBob is that many of the show's most iconic moments actually come from when a character is having a moment of nuance. One of my favorite examples that I think demonstrates this quite well is in an episode in Season 2 called Dying for Pie. In Season 2, Episode 4, Dying for Pie, we follow Squidward at the Krusty Krab as he's told by Mr. Krabs to exchange homemade gifts with SpongeBob in honor of Employee Brotherhood Day.
I wasn't sure how big to make the hole for the head, so I used a watermelon for size.
Not wanting to make a gift for SpongeBob, Squidward approaches a group of pirates to buy one of what seems like a homemade pie. Feeling immense guilt for his carelessness, leading to SpongeBob mistakenly eating an explosive pie, Squidward decides to spend the rest of the day with SpongeBob to do whatever he wants before he explodes at sunset. At the end of the episode, Squidward is dreadfully anticipating SpongeBob exploding, but it's revealed that SpongeBob didn't actually eat the pie and was saving it for later. Upon realizing this, Squidward goes back to being callous towards SpongeBob, the episode ends with Bikini Bottom getting nuked, and just like your standard episodic cartoon, the status quo is restored the very next episode. But that's not to say nothing was gained. Of course, you still get the usual dynamic of Squidward's pessimism acting as a contrast to SpongeBob's relentless positivity, but this episode highlights a part of Squidward you don't often get to see. He doesn't unconditionally hate SpongeBob, he actually goes out of his way to make SpongeBob's last day on Earth the best he's ever had. And do you know how you can have the best day you've ever had? By playing today's sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and it's available right now for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. In War Thunder, you take command of over 2,500 vehicles, which include tanks, planes, helicopters, and warships from 10 major nations. The lineup covers nearly a century of history, from the biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. Every machine has incredibly detailed models, realistic graphics, and excellent sound design that gives it a really authentic feel. And the game's realism isn't just found in its visuals. War Thunder uses one of the most sophisticated damage systems in gaming. Every vehicle is modeled down to its working components, such as engines, fuel tanks, and weapons, all susceptible to damage from enemy fire. Also, the customization is just as deep. Players can modify their vehicles with countless camouflages, historical markings, and decorations, including many made by the community. You can download War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile using the links in the pinned comment or video description. And if you're new, or you haven't played in at least 6 months on PC or console, you can claim a massive bonus pack by signing up through my link. It includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account. This offer is available for a limited time only, so grab it while you can. A big thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Dying for Pie is just one of many examples of an episode that uses its conflict to challenge the character's defining traits in fun ways. In a Season 3 episode, Can You Spare a Dime?, Spongebob gets fed up with Squidward for being a freeloader and ends up getting violently angry at Mr. Krabs for not rehiring Squidward over a petty argument. In several different episodes, although not usually motivated by the plot, Patrick will actually say something somewhat intelligent once in a blue moon.
The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma. Now you must acquire a taste for freeform jazz. This paramecium? Wait, SpongeBob! We're not cavemen! We have technology!
Albeit this subversion is usually short-lived. One of the most frequently cited examples comes from Krusty Krab Delivery, where we get to see a rare moment of Squidward standing up for SpongeBob against a rude customer. It's these moments that remind you that these aren't just boring caricatures, they're a little bit more three-dimensional than that. Or at least they used to be. No, I'm not going to pretend that I've kept up with SpongeBob's massive, ever-growing catalog of new episodes over the years, but after going back and watching a handful of them, including what current fans of the show would consider to be the best of what modern SpongeBob has to offer, I can't say I was very impressed. Something that I've noticed in particular is that this show appears to have doubled down on these existing characters' defining traits to the point of them becoming boring parodies of themselves. In other words, they've been flanderized. This has been most apparent to me when looking at a character's behavior such as Patrick and noticing how he's basically been lobotomized in the show. I know that earlier I was being comedically reductive of Patrick, but the truth is, even his stupidity has been more interesting in earlier episodes. In episodes such as Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 4, Patrick played the role of like an older brother in the sense that SpongeBob would look up to him for advice and help.
But there must be someone else who can help. Someone smart and wise with years of life experience. Patrick!
Of course, the advice would often be absolute nonsense, but that was sort of the dynamic between them. Patrick is confidently dumb, and SpongeBob is cartoonishly naive. Now it feels like both of them are a lot more interchangeable with each other than they once were, with neither of them playing a unique role in their dynamic.
They say the exhibits here date back at least 1 gazillion years. You sure about that math? They do math good.
This flattening of character traits are echoed through the rest of the cast, such as Mr. Krabs getting blatantly greedier, and Sandy having her multifaceted set of interests, including karate and thrill-seeking, be reduced to just being a scientist. This gradual simplification of SpongeBob's cast of characters could simply be written off as a consequence of running a show non-stop for 25 years, but in my opinion, I think this is a symptom of another problem with SpongeBob, and it's one that's tied to the core of what made SpongeBob so successful. Yeah, that's right, I'm explaining jokes again. But more specifically, I'm getting at what I think is a major cause of SpongeBob's characters feeling so different. It basically comes down to the several different ways the show used to deliver a joke. You had slapstick comedy, anti-humor, deadpan, dark humor, observational comedy, absurdist comedy, physical comedy, shock humor, and basically any comedic genre that its age rating permitted. This wide array of clever joke writing and well-timed visual gags helped the humor be more character-driven, because you can write jokes suited around a character's strengths. Take, for example, Squidward. As previously mentioned, Squidward is very sarcastic and cynical, making him the perfect conduit to channel dry and deadpan humor.
Let me guess, Tiny, a small salad?
I'll give him a week.
I'll give him 11 minutes.
Wumbo-wing.
I wonder if a fall from this height would be enough to kill me.
Patrick's low self-awareness lends himself well to physical comedy and slapstick humor, sure, but also to anti-humor or absurdist comedy, where the punchline subverts expectations simply for being so stupid.
Yeast? I thought you said weast.
Weast?
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
No, Patrick, mayonnaise is not an instrument. Horseradish is not an instrument either.
Wait, I have an idea.
Really? What is it?
Let's leave!
And SpongeBob is in a similar boat to Patrick in that his comedic moments can often be a mix of physical and slapstick because of his high energy and the fact that he's stretchy and indestructible. But what's cool about SpongeBob is that he can also play the role as the straight man. A straight man in comedy is a character who acts as the sensible, more logical counterpart to the more ridiculous behavior of another character, often either setting up a joke or reacting to the absurdity of a joke, making it land harder.
I avoided human contact all night to watch this. You got any meat?
Depending on who he's interacting with, SpongeBob can either be the straight man or the fool. His constant enthusiasm and childlike innocence acts as the perfect foil to Squidward's sardonic and easily annoyed temperament, making Squidward act as the straight man for SpongeBob. But when SpongeBob is with Patrick, he's often playing the role of the straight man to the absurdity of Patrick's demeanor. And I think that's what makes SpongeBob a great main character for the show. He pairs very well with the rest of the cast. He's the optimistic antithesis to Squidward's cynicism, excessively loyal and works hard to impress Mr. Krabs, naturally curious and naive to Sandy's background as a squirrel from Texas, and the often more logical, albeit credulous best friend of Patrick. With all these different character interactions, I think it'd be hard not to find a wide array of effective comedic material you could write. But if you go ahead about 10 seasons, you'll notice something a bit different. The vast majority of SpongeBob's comedy is no longer written, but rather drawn. Just non-stop contorting and exaggerating facial expressions paired with the most empty dialogue ever. But of course, that's not to say that kind of visual comedy is necessarily a bad thing when done well and in moderation. Heck, those moments are an inseparable part of the show since its inception. Over-exaggerated facial expressions become an issue when it starts to act as a replacement for clever comedic writing, something the show was arguably known more for. This makes the show now feel like it's aiming to appeal exclusively toward a younger demographic, which I would believe is their intent, if not for the constant references and callbacks to SpongeBob episodes that are decades old at this point. I mean, if you're familiar with SpongeBob's older episodes, it's extremely jarring to see some of the highlights from classic episodes be thoughtlessly repurposed as moments of boring nostalgia pandering. Then what's even worse is that sometimes they'll even butcher the original joke they were drawing from. Take this moment from a Season 2 episode, Sailor Mouth.
Here's one somebody didn't finish. Squidward smells good. Stop!
Now compare that to the first episode of Season 15, where they reference this particular moment.
Squidward smells?
It's true! Squidward smells great!
It doesn't make any sense anymore. You lose the part where SpongeBob misinterprets the graffiti as an unfinished sentence, and now it becomes a confusing reaction from SpongeBob, as if he's in on the joke from 24 years ago. It's lazy and uninspired. SpongeBob's cannibalization of its greatest hits, along with an over-reliance on shallow sight gags, has turned the show from one of the most quotable cartoons ever made into a forgettable shell of its former self. I wish I could tell you that SpongeBob's generational fall-off as a comedy was the end of the story in regard to the degradation of the show I once loved, but we got one last variable that I think contributes to the show just not feeling the same anymore. Now, I'll be the first to admit that SpongeBob hasn't been the most consistently designed character, even in his early seasons. In Season 1, the show was hand-drawn, giving the lines a looser feel to them. There was also more human error present, which I think gave the animation a lot of charm. Since the coloring was done on painted cells, the colors were a bit darker and more muted here than in the show's later iterations, which made it really easy on the eyes. Personally, I think the cruder animation contributed to SpongeBob's debut season having the most personality we would see of the show. Moving on to Season 2, the show had transitioned its inking and coloring to digital, leading to the show having cleaner drawn lines and brighter colors. Along with its transition to digital, SpongeBob's character design had undergone some subtle changes. His eyes are a bit smaller, and his body is more rectangular than his Season 1 counterpart. Shortly after Season 3 ended, the first SpongeBob movie would release in theaters, which would mark the beginning of SpongeBob's metamorphosis into a different character visually. Now, this by no means is a slight on SpongeBob's movie design. I actually don't mind it. The increased budget for the feature-length film meant that SpongeBob could be much more fluidly animated and expressive, and I thought the more saturated colors looked nice, though for some reason they made Mr. Krabs' eyes a distracting shade of green, but I digress. Along with that, the film would be the start of the cutification of SpongeBob's design, an often cited indicator of this being his new chubby cheeks. This would become a far more present feature going forward, as shown in the season that followed. After Season 4, the show would transition to fully digital animation. I don't know if this is a coincidence, but this is also when the animation became fairly less interesting, and wouldn't be properly addressed until after the second movie would come out in 2015. By then, we've reached Season 9 and beyond, and SpongeBob has seen some further adjustments, such as having more oval eyes, and his mouth has become more beak-like. On top of everything else, he's now as bright as a highlighter, when he used to be a warmer shade of yellow that was easier on the eyes. When you compare SpongeBob's pre-movie design to his post-sequel counterpart, it's pretty jarring to see. I'm not denying that I may have some bias toward his old design, as it represents an era of SpongeBob I hold more dear, but I think there's something to be said about a shift of a character's look going a little too far. Whether it was a cynical decision to make him appear more marketable to children, or simply a creative choice by new storyboard artists, I can't say I'm a fan of the new Sponge. SpongeBob SquarePants will always remain as one of my favorite animated television shows of all time, but as you now know, that comes with a huge caveat. It's a little funny to think that despite considering myself to be a fan of SpongeBob, my appreciation only encompasses what is now a small fraction of the show's entirety at this point. I can't even really blame you if you think calling myself a fan is a little misleading. What I can say in confidence, however, is that despite growing up with a show well after its golden years have ended, the episodes that have stuck with me into adulthood were the classics that made SpongeBob the legendary cartoon it's recognized as today. Well, that's that. Whoa, hey, you're not supposed to see that! Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. You can jump into the action for free right now on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile using my links in the pinned comment or video description. If you're new to the game, or if it's been at least 6 months since you last played on PC or console, you'll also get a massive bonus pack with multiple premium vehicles and extra rewards when you sign up through my link. It's a limited time offer, so be sure to grab it while it's available.